Welcome, everyone, to episode 51 of the Malt Strategy Podcast. I am your host, Jean, the Strategy Wargamer. I'm here with my dependable co-hosts, Matt, the Historical Gamer, and Eric, Tortuga Power. What's going on, you guys?
Is that a shot at somebody?
I don't know. I wasn't entirely sure if that was a reference to the fact that you're going to be leaving us early tonight or not.
He's abandoning ship.
Oh, I thought it was that we scheduled previous meetings and we didn't actually go through with them, but...
That would make more sense. I don't really know much. I'm just drinking some Corona right now.
Oh.
Corona, you say?
Saucy.
How appropriate.
You got a lime in it?
No lime. I'm just drinking the shitty-ass skunky macro beer that this is.
I like Corona with a lime.
Yeah, but I don't have a lime, so it's just the skunk without it.
Go in the fridge, find any kind of fruit.
I probably have said this because I repeat most of my stories over and over and over again. And I've talked to you guys a lot, so you probably have heard this before. But when I was in college, probably the last time I had Corona was around this time period. When I was in college, I was going to a friend's in Wisconsin. I was spending the night there, and we got Corona for some reason. I don't remember why. And we didn't have any limes. But what we did have, because it was around Halloween, was we had Tootsie Rolls. And we had lime-flavored Tootsie Rolls. And so we put the lime-flavored Tootsie Rolls in the Corona. And lo and behold, it tasted like there was a lime in it. And it worked really well. Right up until the point where you got to the very bottom of the beer and you got a sludgy, sugary mess. That was the part you wanted to avoid because that was gross as hell. But everything up until that point was pretty good.
Yeah. I just lost my appetite. Thank you.
That is the most college thing ever, by the way.
Yeah, the closest I have to that is Beerios. If you run out of milk in the morning.
Oh, come on.
You'd have Cheerios and beer. It's basically just grain and grain anyway.
The fuck college you guys went to?
Well, beer has food value, but food has no beer value, so I prefer just to drink my liquid bread.
So lately I have been playing... what have I been playing lately?
Yes, what have you been playing?
What can I talk about that I've been playing lately is the bigger question. A lot of Strategic Command World War I still. And Rule the Waves 2. A game I can't talk about yet, which I'm really excited about. And what have you been playing, Jean?
I've been catching up on Heart of Iron 4, and one game that I've been, the DLC, of course, for La Resistance. I've been starting a game on that. But the game that I've been kind of obsessed with lately, I kind of moved over to Battlestar Galactica, their new DLC.
How are you liking that?
Which, oh man, it's absolutely insane. So I immediately jumped into this DLC without completing the initial campaigns, right, for the last 3-4 DLCs that they had. And so I was kind of lost, with where everything was in the Cylon War kind of thing. But the stuff that they had in this DLC in regards to the stuff that they added, I was really, really impressed. So the few things that I've noticed, which I thought were really cool, they have, of course, a 10-episode campaign. If you've been following, if you've been playing every single DLC, it looks fantastic. I like how they're kind of building more, and apparently the Ghost Fleet Offensive kind of goes along with the Battlestar Galactica Blood and Chrome movie. So it takes place, I think 30 years before the series began, and it's a young Adama. Spoiler alert. Adama supposed to go on a rescue mission. He shows up in the middle of Cylon space and finds this colonial fleet of ships that were supposed to be destroyed, and apparently this fleet was going to be a massive counterattack on the Cylon forces. So you actually get to be involved in that, which I thought was kind of cool. Because when I saw the movie, I was like, damn, that's pretty sick. But a couple cool things that I really like out of this new DLC. And you also, if you don't want to even get this DLC, you get a free update called the Fleet Admiral Update. A couple cool things. You can make a flagship out of your fleet, which I thought was kind of cool. They added a shit ton of new loading screens. The UI is really awesome. So one thing I wanted to add that I was hoping they were gonna add when the initial game came out was to select multiple ships at one time instead of just going to, ship number one issuing orders, ship number two issuing orders. You could select multiple ships and, tell them to do something, go attack this and that. And the other thing that they added was new artwork for flagship officers. So all that I just mentioned, that's all free. The stuff that you're paying for on the DLC is the 10-story mission campaign. So I played the first one, and it's really good.
It's interesting that the Slytherin's also going the way of like Paradox with their DLC policy. I think it's a good move, but it's interesting to see that they're starting to do this parallel track of free stuff versus DLC. I'm surprised, actually, because that's more work.
Well, they came out with a shit ton of updates, didn't they? I think a week or two ago, I saw they updated literally every single recent game from Armored Brigade all the way to even Strategic Command World War One. They added a new scenario. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it was. If you go to, I don't know if you're on a web browser right now, but if you go to the Matrix Games website, one of the news items, they have. What do you call it? It's called, if you scroll down, it's listed as major updates, and it's literally Strategic Command got a new scenario in 1914, March to Paris. And basically, you know how the map of Strategic Command is, one province is almost 30 or 50 square miles.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of zoom in now. So it's the German border, the French border, a little bit of Netherlands and Belgium, and it's a massive map of that. So it's more, I guess, zoomed in, I would say.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting.
And then Armor Brigade, they added, they improved the scenario design editor. They added something for close combat, the Bloody First, a game editor, and moding support. So, yeah, I'm really impressed with what they're doing. Did you guys get a chance to play any of the of these updates, Matt?
Nope.
So what have you been playing?
A couple of things. I've been playing a little bit of Panzer Corps 2, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later. And then over the last 2 to 3 days, I've been binging and recently completed a new indie game that came out called Yes, Your Grace. And Yes, Your Grace is basically a kingdom management RPG where you're a king in sort of a fantasy medieval kingdom, and you have to kind of deal with petitioners who are coming to you asking for things, all while your kingdom is under serious threat of being overrun by invading armies, and you have to, manage things like marrying your daughters off to somewhat unsavory princes or kings or whatever. So it's a lot of fun. I played through it. I finished my first playthrough in about 7 hours. Very story-based, a lot of text involved. But it's got a really appealing art style as well. I think it's just a really well-done game, and I've really enjoyed my time with it.
Yeah, I like it. I was actually checking this game out a couple of days ago. I was kind of going through my Steam Friends page, and I saw you were playing, and I was like, oh, shit. And going through the screenshots, it looks kind of really interesting.
Yeah, it's, it's got over, at least when I looked earlier, it had over 1,700 players currently playing. I know it only came out a few days ago, but that's pretty good, I think, for kind of, I don't know if I'd call it an indie because they do have a publisher, but it definitely looks and feels like an indie game. I don't think it's a huge studio or anything like that. It's only $19 usually. It's on sale for launch at $17.99, so it's a pretty affordable game. It's made by the same developer who made Not Tonight, which is, I'm not 100% sure what the game is about, but I think it's it's a similar looking and feeling game. I think it has something to do with the EU, but I'm not quite sure. It's got a very similar art style. I haven't played it. Basically, it's got a line here where it's like, work hard and stay out of trouble, and we might let you stay in the UK. So I think it's like you're like an immigrant in the UK, and it's I think it's sort of playing off sort of modern political stuff, which Yes, Your Grace doesn't do any of that. Yes, Your Grace is really just medieval fantasy, a little bit of Game of Thrones-y kind of stuff. But
So I'm kind of curious, did you guys become president?
President in Yes, Your Grace?
No, in the Political Machine 2020 that I've been seeing you guys play.
Oh yeah, I did. I lit the world on fire. I let it all burn, and Bernie Sanders is now the president of the United States, thanks to yours truly. Although we have not played each other.
That was in 2044 or so?
I'm going to get one-star reviews.
2044, I'm pretty sure Bernie will be long.
I just mean that, it didn't happen right away, right?
Oh, yeah, I did lose 8 times in a row before I ended up winning. I lost once with Bernie, I lost once with Trump, I lost once with Warren, I lost once with... I think I tried to win as Romney and lost as Romney. And then eventually, my 7th or 8th playthrough, my 2nd or 3rd time with Bernie, I won with him. So, but it's
that's a good sign, though. It means the game has some difficulty to it because it seems like a bit of a simple game at first, but
it is pretty simple. It's like bobbleheads type characters. I wish they had the debates. They don't. They have things like interviews or other things you can do with TV characters, but there's no actual debates. Mm-hmm. I think the game is a little bit too simplistic for my taste. As I get through it, it's challenging if you're not really paying attention to what you're doing. But when you actually double click on the states and look at issues that matter to the people in the states, you can very quickly just be like, "Oh yeah, I'm a Republican, but I care about gun control." As you're giving a speech in a pro gun control state, and then you go back to another state and you kind of contradict yourself, and that can get you in some trouble in some circumstances, but I feel like people are very willing to believe you on fringy issues that, maybe they probably in a real world would not be quite so gullible.
Or maybe this is just the developer's way of kind of saying bad things about democracy.
Maybe. It might be the developer's way of gamifying it too, right? Because when I was running as Bernie, Trump came in and won California in one of my games, and I was just like, that would never happen.
That just would not happen.
That's nuts.
So
what was the when you won? What was the the state that kind of got you there?
There were a couple, which is pretty. I think the game is set up to make the current battleground states important. So, in that sense, I think the game got it right. I just think it's too easy to turn states that never would turn otherwise. But at least in my game, I think it probably resembled a more realistic election in the one that I won. In that winning the key states for me winning the election were winning Pennsylvania and Ohio. Those are sort of the two that probably put me over the edge. I can't remember if I won Florida or not. And I think I lost Wisconsin, I know that. But sort of in terms of the key battleground states, if you look around in the real world, Ohio and Pennsylvania are both, very important states, and then Florida obviously as well. And then Wisconsin to a lesser degree, but it's still another one of those battleground states. So, I found myself spending most of my time battling in the states that were instrumental in winning it for Trump in 2016, and will certainly be instrumental in whoever wins in 2020. Those same states. Oh, Michigan! I won Michigan too. That was another important state for me to win.
I just want to say that I mostly agree with what THG said, but I actually found the game very good. I thought that I like the level of strategic complexity that they ended up going with. They could have done more with it, but it's kind of nice to have it's a simpler game. I mean, that's compared to the games we're used to playing. It might be pretty complex for somebody who's used to action games. So I think they hit the right balance, and it makes it pretty easy to just pick up, play, and then drop. You can finish an entire game in an hour and a half. So
yeah, I played through my really sort of thoughtful game when I didn't just click through things, and I played through and I looked at all the detailed stats and all those other things. Played through that in about an hour. So definitely an easy to pick up and play game. I will say there's another game that's really sort of I'm debating looking into, and it's called The Political Process, which I think is more simulation than otherwise. It's very basic art style, a little bit of spreadsheet with some graphics. Same price as the Political Machine. It's $14.99, but in this game, apparently you run for political office, But then once you're in office, you actually have the ability to like write legislation, balance budgets, and more.
Oh, wow.
As you attempt to move up the political hierarchy. So I think it's kind of like
It sounds like that game Democracy.
maybe, but it looks a little bit different. Like I think the focus is like you are a politician, and then you're trying to work your way up, and try and gain more and more power and whatnot. But it's pretty interesting here. Like I think it's more detailed than Democracy, to be honest. I think Democracy was a pretty basic game where you just had like basically tech tree type or policy type trees that you would go down.
I mean, I really like Democracy 3. Actually, they lost me at the DLC. I probably just improved the game, but it was that same as EU4 type thing where I knew how to play Democracy 3, the base game, and the DLC threw off my... They basically, I think that they were trying to rebalance some things because people were doing the same strategies. Those are probably the strategies I was using. And then in the DLC, I was kind of lost. So I didn't even bother trying to relearn the good strategy.
Yeah, like I'm just looking at one of the screenshots in here, and it's like there's an office tab, there's a campaign tab, politicians tab, elections, metrics, profile, news, overview, events, marketing, opponents, poll data, finance, contracts, staff, policy, volunteers, campaign map. So, like, this feels like it's a much deeper political sim. And, based off what it's saying, it goes beyond just winning an election, which most of the games that come out around sort of the campaigning time or that focus on the presidential elections really don't deal with running for... Like, once you're in office, they really don't deal with running things. Democracy might be a little bit different, but again, like this has treasury fund revenue, and this has expenditures, surplus deficit, road trust fund, social security fund, Medicare fund. Like this is all part of the policy screen. It's way more detailed than my experience with Democracy 2. I didn't really play Democracy 3. So I think it's a really interesting looking game where you can kind of create your own character, create your own politician, and you can... it's like starting location, pick a state. What are you trying to run for? And it has like maps down to like the county level for different types of campaigns that you're running. So I think it's interesting. There is sort of I think some elements of Democracy in here, but like I think it's a little bit more real looking to me. So. I don't know how it plays. I haven't played it, so maybe I'll take the plunge and jump into it. Like, there's a governor budget in here where you're like running as a governor of a state, and you're running the state.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. I don't know if it's any good. It has actually a very positive rating on Steam with 406 total reviews and 66 recent reviews.
So is this like the out of the park baseball version of politics?
It might be. Like looking at it, it kind of reminds me of out of the park baseball to some extent, with more graphs, but yeah,
more graphs. Wow.
Well, I mean, out of the park baseball is more stats than graphs, but
okay.
Anyway,
Fair.
And this developer is their only game. It's Verlumino Studios LLC. It's the only game they have on Steam right now.
Yeah, I could tell. The graphics are very Microsoft Windows Paint kind of edition.
Yeah, but for games like this, I think that's okay. Like this one person says their political history, governor of West Virginia, and it shows like they ran like 6 campaigns as the governor of West Virginia. Then they became, that was the end of their political career. They started off mayor of a city for like 8 years. Then they were state representative, House Minority Leader, state representative, House Minority Leader.
Oh.
Chair of the Conservative Democrats, state representative. So, like, this person has a huge career where they ended up the culmination of their career was being governor for about 20 years of West Virginia. But, like, they had this whole thing where they were a representative, mayor of a city, and all these other things. So it looks really interesting to me.
Yeah, it does look stat heavy, which is kind of attractive. So, one other thing, since I wanted to kind of pique Tortuga's interest, so I was going through, while you guys were talking, I was going through Slytherin's major update things. Field of Glory 2, Iberia update is out, and Field of Glory Empire's Diplomacy update is officially released. I know that's going to whet your palate.
Yeah, I mean, I was excited by the idea of getting back into Field of Glory Empires, but I have to be honest, I haven't had time to do it yet. The diplomacy was something lacking, but I don't know. I don't think that the game has changed immensely. I don't think if you didn't like the base game before, you're suddenly going to like it with the diplomacy. It's going to feel like more of a fleshed out game. It's going to be satisfying for people who are already playing it. That's my 2 cents.
I thought you were going to be like thrilled. You'd be like, I can't wait to get on it.
I mean, I really enjoyed my time with Field of Glory Empires. Right now, I'm not really... it's kind of like, what do you feel like playing? And I'm not... Nothing about the classical period, the ancient times, is drawing me in right now. Usually, I'll see something or have a conversation with somebody about a specific time period, and then that's what kind of drives me or gets me enthusiastic to play a period, a war game or some kind of game in that time period. And I haven't been talking or thinking about the classical period right now, so it's the game I would go back to if I wanted to play something like the Parthians or the Carthaginians, but I don't have any grand desire to do that right now.
Well, all right, interesting. I expected a different response, but we'll see what happens.
You can't pin me
in a couple
down,
weeks,
John.
maybe. I'm kind of curious to see what your reaction would be on that. So before you go away, because I don't know if we mentioned it in the episode, but Tortuga is gonna like bow out somewhere during the episode. But before he bows out, I wanted to ask him a couple of questions on Panzer Corps 2. So we're officially moving to the main topic here.
Okay, let's do it.
So I wanted to ask you before you bow out. It's going to be me and Matt talking about Panzer Corps 2. And I was kind of curious, why have you never taken to Panzer Corps 1 or Panzer Corps 2? What was kind of like, what didn't attract you about the game?
I find that it's the same thing which kind of draws me away from the Order of Battle series, which probably is based on Panzer Corps, at least it feels or looks very similar. I'm not a huge fan.
The same type of game.
Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of this very limited number of units. I mean, there are some Order of Battle maps. I remember one in China, I think it was, Japan versus China, which was actually pretty big. But it feels like a lot of the maps are small, or you're not using that many units, and it's really a very tactical decisions. I don't feel like there's a huge, like the decision space that you have to work with is pretty narrow. I would compare Panzer Corps to Unity of Command. We just had Unity of Command 2, and I already expressed to a degree that that's not even my favorite game. But I like Unity of Command, and well, actually I like Unity of Command 2 much better than I like the Panzer Corps 2 that at least from what I've seen of it. It gives you more options. I
think if you like Unity of Command, I think you're going to love Panzer Corps because it addresses the exact things that you didn't like in Unity of Command, but it keeps that in-depth supply system.
It does not have an in-depth supply system.
I think it does because...
Or if it does not communicate it.
Unity of Command 2 had at least a...
No, Unity of Command has a much better supply system than Panzer Corps 2. We can talk about this when you step out, but I don't think that's even remotely comparable.
But all right, so another thing you were saying that there's not a lot of units. So literally on the scenarios that I play, I usually get maybe between air and land units. I would probably have maybe like I would say between 20 and 40 units. What kind of like, where are you kind of like?
No, yeah, that's much bigger than I was expecting. So that is a big thing then. So first of all, I should say full disclosure, I have not played Panzer Corps 2. I've only watched videos on it. I've read reviews, and the videos I watched were probably the beginning ones in Poland. Maybe they're supposed to be kind of tutorial, hand-holding-ish. And the number of units you're using in that are probably 10 to 20. And that's the small decision space that I was referring to. So if you're saying that this ends up being more or less the same number of units as Unity of Command 2, then it's interesting. But I'm not playing Unity of Command 2. I haven't played much of it. I like the game, but essentially there's better options out there. So I mean, if I wanted to do some kind of like tactical fighting of like Normandy or whatever, I don't know. It's like Unity of Command 2 is awesome, probably from the standpoint that it has a campaign, and that also obviously is true in Panzer Corps 2. But if you wanted to play like Normandy, or if you wanted to play Battle of the Bulge, or if you want to play the invasion of Poland, just that part, if you just want to do a map of that, you're probably better off like, I don't know what exists, but something like a John Tiller map that's dedicated to that. So,
except if you're playing John Tiller, you're back in 1990.
Yeah, I wish I could come up with a better example than John Tiller, but you get the point. Something special.
I love John Tiller games.
Really?
Even though it's like a little bit retro, but his games were like one of the first few that I actually fell in love with, because like exactly like you were saying, if you wanted to play Battle of the Bulge or a specific battle, like it was very easy to kind of get into the game, at least for me, and learn it and actually get like detailed unit stats. Like you can control squads and individual troops, like individual like squad leader, like a staff sergeant.
John Tiller games are games that I would love to like, and they look awesome. Like the scale of some of the stuff, like his campaign series for the Civil War, are games I've bought a couple of them because like I really want to like this. This looks awesome. The idea behind like this branching scenarios where things are linked and you have these strategic decisions that affects the next scenario. Like these are things I want to love. It looks cool. Even some of the stuff they've done graphical upgrades in the last year or two to make them pop a little bit more. Like these are all things I want to get into. But then when it actually comes down to playing the game, it just feels way too micro for me. Like I want to play the Peninsula campaign, but I don't want to order every single regiment around, like individual regiments around. I'd rather just command things like at the brigade level or whatnot. I don't care about splitting a regiment out. Like I'm not really interested in sort of that sand table type experience where you just have to control literally everything.
I was going to say, I think, Sean, you might be a prodigy or something, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say John Tiller games are easy to get into. That's the first I've ever heard someone say that. So.
Like, it's weird. I mean, like, I remember I was in South Carolina, and I remember playing this, and I remember, like, how awesome it was, moving units. I mean, the learning curve, I think this is going back, like, 15, 20 years, but I don't think it took me that long to pick it up, because you can just like select individual units, select the weapons you want that squad to have, and then just, I think it was like left click and then tell them to go whichever hex you wanted.
I'm not saying it's hard to order them around the map. I'm just saying that at least in my experience with it, it was a little bit clunky and unwieldy, and it took way too much time. Like it reminds me, he didn't do the Battleground series, did he? Or did he do those? They were basically the same exact kind of a game. There were like these like 8 or 9 or 10 different Battleground games, and one of them was Waterloo. And it was like ordering literally around every single battalion in the French army at Waterloo. It's like, no, it's a 70,000 man army, and I don't want to be commanding 500 man increments of that, and then watch each individual one's combat resolution occur. Like, it was just, it's the same sort of style for John Tiller. I mean, I think John Tiller games, I was reading a review when they released a patch, I want to say it was earlier this year, or earlier last year, where they overhauled a lot of the graphics to make it look a little bit more modern. And they were looking specifically at the Valley campaign Tiller game. So they looked at there's a John Tiller game that focuses on the Valley campaigns in the American Civil War, both the Stonewall campaigns and also the 1864 campaigns with Sheridan and Early. And, they basically made the comment, like, if you're looking at getting into Tiller, this is probably one of the games you should really look into. And I think that's a good point, is because the battles in the Valley were so much smaller. And so a system like that works reasonably well if you're looking at a regimental-sized game when you're playing through battles that only have a couple thousand men or 10,000 men sort of at the most, at least in some of the 1862 fights. That would be much more manageable for that kind of a system. The problem is the games that were the most interesting to me were the Peninsula campaign, when you've got an army of 80,000 men attacking an army of 100,000 men, And that's where that becomes a problem. And I know most of the battles weren't quite that large, but that sort of illustrates the point of I have no desire to command 200 regiments. But, if it's 20 or if it's 30 or whatever, then that works better. But I really feel like the John Tiller games are more geared toward folks who are really into sort of tabletop wargaming, with miniatures. Like that to me is sort of what they're trying to recreate on PC, which is absolutely fine, and there's definitely a market for that. I'm just not that market.
I think you should try the Vietnam, because going through, I see Squad Battles Vietnam, and I remember buying that one and playing it. Like, that deals with small squad to company-based movements, and I remember playing like the Idrang Valley or Hamburger Hill scenarios, and they were like really amazing. And some of the scenarios where you have like maybe a platoon and you have to fight against maybe 2 companies of NVA, they're incredible. You could do air strikes, and some of the animations, even though like it's not like Ultimate General, they were still like attractive, when I saw them on screen.
Yeah, I'd have to go back. I mean, he's got a very large catalog of games, and it's probably not fair to sort of paint them all with the same brush, although I will say in my limited experience with Tiller games, they all kind of feel the same, except I think one of the key failings of the Tiller games is that it's sort of like it's a system, right? Like it's a certain system for those games, depending on whether it's squad battles or it's the campaign series or whatnot. And that system is just rinsed, reused, and recycled for different battles. And I think the system works better at smaller scale, and as you scale up, I think it becomes unwieldy, which I think is something I've noticed maybe a problem with Panzer Corps 2. Segue.
Getting us back, really.
Yeah. But with that being said, I think we can kind of allow Tortuga, Eric, to sign off, unless there's any closing words he wishes to share, any closing pieces of wisdom that he wishes to share.
Actually, I'm just going to be excited to hear what you guys say about this. I'll probably come back and listen to this podcast myself just to see if maybe there's more to Panzer Corps than originally met my eyes. So, otherwise, thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Our co-host is going to be a listener for this episode.
That's right. I'll just sink into the audience.
We've got one. We've got a listener.
That makes one. All right.
Okay.
We'll see you on the other side, Tortuga.
Well, now that Tortuga signed off, we can talk about Panzer Corps 2. I know he has not played it. I have. The game comes out, like a week from now?
It comes out on the 19th, so about 10 days.
Okay.
Well, we're on March 9th, so if you're listening to this, you're probably listening to this close to 19th or after.
Okay, so yeah, it comes out on the 19th. Slytherin and Matrix did an interesting thing with this game where they gave access to a bunch of YouTubers on a limited period of time. It was like 2 days. And then basically, apparently, a bunch of YouTubers were like, come on, we need more than 2 days to try and play through this. And so then they expanded it out to more time. But then they sort of revoked the codes, and then they did this beta pre-order where they gave like the first version they shared was like a preview version, so it only had like 10 scenarios. And then they did this beta pre-order thing closer to release, and then people who pre-ordered the game got access to it for like 48 hours. But it was more of like the final version of the game. Then they gave that back to YouTubers again for a limited period of time, and then they kind of pulled that back as they're working on finalizing the game. That was all like a month before the game came out, and now we're closing in on the actual official game release a little bit over a week from the time that we're recording. For those of you who are unaware, Panzer Corps 2 is the sequel to Panzer Corps 1. I know, that's shocking. Panzer Corps 1 came out in 2012, did very well for Slytherin and Matrix. I believe they said they sold over 1 million copies total of the game. Maybe it wasn't 1 million. Maybe it was like 200. Hundreds of thousands, for sure. I thought maybe it said 1 million, but I could be wrong. Now, that being said, you mentioned earlier that Slytherin sort of adopting a Paradox-type DLC approach. They very much had a Paradox-style DLC approach for Panzer Corps 1. Panzer Corps 1 came out, didn't actually have the desert battles. It was really just sort of Europe from 1939 to the conclusion of the war. Then they came out with the Desert Rats DLC, which focused on just North Africa. They came out with a Allied Corps DLC, which allowed you to play through the campaigns of the Allies. I believe they came out with like a Russian focused DLC. They came out with this sort of grand campaign set of DLCs, which like added, like 10 plus battles for every year of the war. So there were like 5 of those. There was a 39, a 40. There might have been like an early 40, late 40 even. But they had literally like 12 to 13 DLC packs that came out with Panzer Corps 1. I'm curious to see if they follow the same approach with Panzer Corps 2, because it's a much bigger game than Panzer Corps 1 was. But anyway, so Panzer...
on the website, it says that if you get the Field Marshal Edition, it comes with the first 2 DLCs for Panzer Corps 2. So we know there's 2 DLCs in the pipeline.
Okay. Yeah, so they'll at least have 2. But I don't mean to just ramble, but Panzer Corps 1 came out in 2012, was very well regarded. Very much a modern remake of Panzer General, which is the sort of the spiritual predecessor of this game. The idea behind these games is they are scenario-based games where each battle is a scenario. You have certain set objectives. You have a certain amount of time to take those objectives. Almost all the battles in the original Panzer General were offensive battles, where the idea was take an objective. There were some late war scenarios where you were on the defensive, primarily told from the side of the Germans. Although, the Allied Corps expansion obviously allowed you to play as the Allies. The Allied General game, which was a sequel to Panzer General, was told specifically from the Allied side. But these are turn-based war games that are a little bit abstract. A unit isn't necessarily equal to a division or a corps or an army or anything like that. It's basically you have a map, you have objectives you need to take. It's a turn-based game. Each unit sort of has a health basis of out of 10, and then you can have overstrength units as well. Infantry, I think, is a base out of 15, but armored units and all the other units is a base of 10, and then it just sort of works down from a hit point perspective. So you're not taking casualties per se, you're losing hit points, and as you lose hit points, your unit becomes less deadly, less effective, and as it runs out of hit points, then it dies. And so that's, I guess, the best way to describe the game. There probably wasn't a very succinct way of going over the game, but basically, turn-based game, abstract units, no specific number of casualties, a little bit beer and pretzels, and it sort of allows you to test things like combined arms and other things like that. That was the idea behind Panzer Corps 1 and Panzer General and some of the earlier versions. I feel like Panzer Corps 2 is a little bit more complex, but I'll let you talk for a bit about it, John.
So, yeah, I mean, I got to try it out, like you were saying, the first one that they came out, the trial, I think was in February, and then the 2-day one, I got to try like maybe, I think a couple hours worth of that one. And I've played Panzer Corps 1 on both the PC and they have an iPad version, apparently, and I play that pretty every so often. So, just kind of comparing them, I am kind of, it's basically like the difference between, if you I always use car analogies, it's basically like comparing, the original Ford that came out in the, I guess, in the 1910s to a 2019 Ford Mustang. Because looking at the screenshots side by side with Panzer Corps 1 and Panzer Corps 2, it's like, I get floored. Like, Panzer Corps 2, when I first played it, I just got amazed by like the level of texture of the map. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's, I would say, probably the best tactical textured map, better than many of the other games that I've played. Like, I originally thought Ultimate General had one of the best tactical maps that I've seen. This definitely takes it up a notch. There's so many like little things, nuances that they added into this. Like, if you have a plane above, on the map, you could see the shadow on the ground. Like, little things like that I noticed, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty neat. I overall, like, playing the game for just those couple hours, I was really impressed by the game. And there was a whole bunch of things that I really liked, and I had like made a list here But a couple of things that right off the bat that I've kind of noticed. One, it's intuitive. Like I got into the game, I was able to just start playing it right away, so I didn't have to go through any tutorial. I don't know if there was a tutorial added in. I don't know if they added that in, but I didn't need it, so I just automatically went into it. The UI is so much modern and cleaner than Panzer Corps 1. Like Panzer Corps 1, I believe the UI was a little kind of stale, a little bit, a lot more darker, a lot more grayer. Didn't pop out. This one is kind of sleek. It's more modern and it's out of the way. You see more of the map and more of your units, which
they definitely with Panzer Corps 2 they approach the UI. It's very clearly they did the UI in a modern sort of design concept. Panzer Corps 1 was not that, but it was deliberately so. If you compare screenshots from Panzer Corps 1 to Panzer General, which came out in the 1990s, you can see that they're very, very similar. So I think deliberately so, Panzer Corps 1 was trying to evoke the look and feel of Panzer General because it was really the first time that I'd seen in sort of, at least in the more mainstream, where someone had said like, oh, this old SSI game that came out 20 years ago that was sort of one of the early paragons of wargaming that was democratized wargaming to a certain extent. It was very popular in a mainstream sort of a way at a time in the gaming industry where war games could still be very successful in the mainstream, which is really not true anymore. But Panzer Corps was very much sort of this hearkening back to the 1990s art style of Panzer General. Panzer Corps 2, I think, is trying to be more modern. The UI, obviously, as I said, is following more modern design concepts, getting the UI out of the way, minimizing the number of clicks you have to do, minimizing the amount of screens and windows and other things like that. And if they are there, sort of making sure that you're able to hide them pretty sleekly, so you really only have to go to them if you're looking for them, if you really want them, but you don't need them to play. And so I think that's a very big divergence between the two. Regarding the graphics, Panzer Corps 1 was a 2D, I believe, sprite-based map. So it was sort of this top-down 2D map with units that would move across it. Again, all two-dimensional. Panzer Corps 2 is going with a 3D map, and so that's one of the reasons you kind of talked about how it looks, a lot prettier, a lot nicer. And that's because they've moved from 2D to 3D. I'll be honest, I think I actually like the look and feel of Panzer Corps 1's art style better. Yes, it does feel a little bit out of date. It does feel more 1990s-esque. But I think part of the reason I still play games like Panzer Corps is I am looking for a little bit of that Panzer General feel, a little bit of that nostalgia. I still remember when I was like 10 or 11 playing Panzer Corps 1 on my Sony PlayStation, listening to Bob Uecker announcing baseball games, throughout the summer. And so, there's a bit of a nostalgia factor there. That was one of those few games that I was playing at the time that was a war game. I was very much more into sports games at the time. And Panzer Corps was one of the, or Panzer General was one of the few war games out there that was accessible. Again, it was on Sony PlayStation back in the 1990s. So again, It's very much a mainstream sort of a war game. And so, I think there maybe it's a nostalgia factor to me, but I do like that look and feel and that design concept of Panzer Corps 1. I think a little bit better. Not saying it's necessarily prettier, just Panzer Corps 1 speaks more to me artistically than I think Panzer Corps 2 does. Although I do think I actually prefer the UI of Panzer Corps 2 over Panzer Corps 1. Even though that is a big part of what I just said I like, it is a big part of the nostalgia factor. I think Panzer Corps 2's UI is much more user-friendly and usable.
Yeah, I mean, going over the Panzer Corps 1 screenshots here, I do agree with you. It definitely it definitely kind of took Panzer 1, Panzer General, and kind of made the graphics just a little bit more modern, I guess, for that when Panzer Corps 1 was released, which was, when was this released? I think it was...
Panzer Corps 1 was 2012. Panzer General 1 was like 92 or something, 93.
Oh, wow, okay. So a couple of decades, yeah, so they kind of made it a little bit more up-to-date. But, kind of comparing Panzer Corps 1 to Panzer Corps 2, I like what they did. They just took the best things out of Panzer Corps 1. They brought them over, and they refined the things that I wasn't that crazy about. So one of the things that I don't believe you could do in Panzer Corps 1, but you could definitely do in Panzer Corps 2, is let's say you have an infantry unit, right? And there are 2 enemy units coming at you, and you're like, oh shit, now I'm going to be surrounded and attacked on both sides. What you can do with that infantry unit is you can actually split it in half. Now, obviously, your strength goes down, but you can have one half of that infantry unit go to fight the enemy unit in the north, and the other half of that infantry unit go to the south to fight the other side of that enemy unit. I really like that. I've been using that every so often to take objectives. So instead of having one unit go for this objective, then after that objective, I would split it twice and then take 2 objectives right away. Found that very useful. And then the other thing, which I didn't want, because I didn't kind of consider when I was playing Panzer Corps 1, and it was in a dev diary that they released, and it really got me excited. I was like, holy shit, why didn't I think of this as like a wish list kind of item? So in Panzer Corps 1, I believe when you have aerial units, I believe you could put them anywhere on the map, right? And then you click, the next turn, and that aerial unit is in the same hex that you left it at. In Panzer Corps 2, it doesn't work like that. So if you have your units, and let's say you go to the front line, you attack, your aerial units are attached to an air base. So you can have those aerial units kind of do a sortie attack at the front line, but they go back at the end of their turn. And if your front line kind of moves forward, your aerial units might not be able to support them. So you have to, as you're moving forward, kind of keep your eye on air bases to take, so just where you can have your units kind of continue supporting you. I thought that was really cool. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I think that was actually one of my favorite things with Panzer Corps 2, actually, is the way they reworked air units. So Panzer Corps 1, again, it's a turn-based, hex-based map, and units would move across the map toward the objectives, they'd occupy a hex, and then they would consume supplies as they move forward and ammunition when they fight. And in Panzer Corps 1, you would fly aircraft wherever you went, all over the map, and then you would hit end turn, and when you end the turn, the aircraft remains there. It basically treats... The air unit is in the air. It isn't attackable directly by like a ground unit. Anti-aircraft units, yes. Other air units, yes, but not necessarily like a ground unit actually attacking it. And so air units would sort of fly on this two-dimensional plane in the air, but then they just stay there. So they fly, they bomb, they stay there in Panzer Corps 1. In Panzer Corps 2, as you said, they are tied to an air base. So at the end of every single turn, the air unit then returns to the base. And so that gives a much more, I think, realistic feel of, as you're advancing across France, you need to keep moving your air units up to air bases that you're capturing in order to, support your advance. And if you don't take airfields as you're advancing, then you could quickly outstrip your aircraft's ability to support your advance. And so I think that's a really well done mechanic that I really enjoy and makes the game feel much better in its representation of air combat. Air units don't get to loiter over Warsaw for 15 days without returning to base, as they could theoretically in Panzer Corps 1. So I really enjoy that. It does give this sense of range of aircraft, and different aircraft have different ranges, and so that becomes another thing that you need to kind of factor in as you play. The one thing that I will call out is Panzer Corps 1 still had supplies, it still had fuel, so air units would have to return to base eventually, but usually it's like after 5 or 6 turns or something like that, not at the end of every turn. And so I really did enjoy that. The other thing, too, is if an airfield with your aircraft is taken over by the enemy, then your aircraft have to rebase. And if you lose your last airfield, all of your aircraft could theoretically be destroyed on the ground. So again, these are really interesting mechanics that I think add a lot to the game. And I think, in my opinion, this is one of the best features. I don't really care about the 3D graphics. I've said I like some of the visual appeal of Panzer Corps 1 better, but this was light years ahead of what was represented in Panzer Corps 1, and frankly better than the way it's represented in Order of Battle or any of the other sort of Panzer General type clones out there. I really enjoy the way they did this.
What about the split unit feature that they have?
I saw it. I haven't ever found the need to use it.
Yeah, I've used it only for the objective stuff, and I was kind of thrown in a pickle a couple of times, so I did kind of use it every so often. Not as often as, well, aerial assets, but...
It could be useful. I think one of the problems is a unit's ability to effectively attack and fight is directly related to how strong the unit is. So if you split a 15 strength unit into a 7 and an 8, then you're massively reducing the combat effectiveness, as they should, right? Like, if you send half a division one way and half another, they're not going to be as effective as a division. But in terms of the way the game works, like, I've never seen the AI split their units, so unless I'm just using it to move forward to take an unoccupied base, I rarely think it's very useful, because I'm attacking with a much weaker unit. Like, unless it's just to take unoccupied bases, I just don't think that it's very useful. Not that it's not a nice thing to be able to do. Again, theoretically, if you're trying to get to some objectives before a scenario ends, it might come in handy. But the game gives such a penalty to weak units and such a strong penalty to overstrength units that I haven't found myself using it. One of the other things worth mentioning is, in the past, like in Panzer Corps 1, I believe the only way you could overstrength a unit is if it had experience. So in Panzer Corps 1, all of your units' base strength was 10. So you could be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way out to 10 strength unit. And that basically 10 was 100% strength. And then you'd have, as you take casualties, you would lose effectiveness there. Eventually till you were destroyed. Units could be larger than 10 if they had experience. So like if they had enough experience to fill an experience star, they could be 11. I think theoretically they could be up to 15. In Panzer Corps 2, you can actually overstrength a unit when you order it. So rather than waiting for a unit to have a certain amount of experience to have more men in it, you can just buy a unit at, maybe it's an armored unit and its base strength is 10. You could theoretically say, I want to overstrength this unit up to 15. And you could do that. It costs more, and it uses up more of your sort of your unit cap, if you will. Every unit sort of has a value in terms of whether it's like 3 infantry or 4 infantry or 5 infantry, in terms of you have a unit cap in terms of how many units you can have in each scenario. And it's usually like 70 or something like that. So you can have a total weight of units of up to 70. Every unit has a different weight based on the type of unit and the size of the unit, and if you overstrength it, it adds weight. So, infantry might be a weight of 3, but if they're overstrength, it might be a weight of 4 or a weight of 5. So you can overstrength units to make them more effective, but it also reduces the number of units then you can field, which is a nice trade-off to balance. I found that overstrength fighter units are so much more useful. I would rather have 2 fighter units of 15 strength than 3 fighter units of 10 strength, because when they engage other enemy units, a 15 versus 10, you're going to get like a 3-1 or 4-1 engagement every time, rather than if it's a 10-10, it's going to be like 2-2 or 3-2. And so you just take so many more casualties, which are expensive to replace. If you're going even odds, you should always try to go where you outnumber the enemy.
Now I have a question for you. So like, let's say you have that 15 strength unit and you're attacking my 10, right, unit, but I split that 10 unit into 2 5s, right? And you attack the first unit, right? But I move the second unit to your, to the opposite side of not the map, but the opposite side of your unit. So you're attacking my first unit head on, but my second unit comes out to your rear and attacks you. Is there a flank? So I've done that repeatedly to the AI. I think there's a mechanic in there where if you're attacked from 2 sides, I believe this is what from my observations, that the unit takes more of a hit, like a penalty based, because it's being attacked on both sides.
There is a mass attack bonus for an attacker. So if you have multiple units adjacent to an enemy and you attack, then the other units support it somehow. They don't actually join in the attack directly, but they do support it, which influences the effectiveness of the attack. My belief is if you're splitting units to do that, the bonus of having multiple units adjacent to attacking an enemy unit in a nearby hex is not enough to overcome the fact that you just cut in half the combat effectiveness of the unit that's attacking.
And in regards to, so what do you think about supply lines in this game? Because from what I remember, I played the game like a few weeks ago from last time they did the beta thing. I remember supply lines. I had a couple of times the enemy kind of went around and took the road behind my units, and I noticed that my unit's effectiveness was reduced and their combat ability. What do you think about the supply lines with this game versus, like, let's say Unity of Command, which is very supply line oriented?
Units can definitely be encircled, which I don't fully understand how that works, but a unit, if an enemy moves in behind you and there's units in front and maybe on the side, you may see this little thing that pops up for a split second that says encircled, which means your unit is surrounded. And that will make it much less combat effective. I haven't noticed anything with regards to actual supply lines being cut. Now, when you're encircled, your radius of movement is much less due to sort of zones of control rules. So if the enemy encircles you, not a huge impact the first turn, but the second turn or the third turn or the fourth turn, you become less and less combat effective. But it's all very abstract. It's not as well... if it is there, it's not as well communicated to you, in my opinion, than Unity of Command, where supply is very, very discreetly communicated to you. And I don't think that is the case in Panzer Corps 2. Supply exists, like your units run out of fuel, they run out of ammunition, but I haven't noticed like, oh, they're on the roadway, therefore my supplies are reduced. It's more along the lines of, well, if they're on the roadway and they're in my front, then I'm surrounded, and so then I get a penalty to my combat effectiveness, and if I remain encircled for too long, then my unit will become basically completely ineffective and easy to kill. But I wouldn't call it the same thing. I think what it's trying to say is, you're surrounded, so therefore you are screwed, as opposed to, like, you're not actually surrounded, but they're on the roadway that feeds your supply. Like, that latter is not something I've really experienced.
What do you think? One thing I also noticed in this game is that I don't think you could do this in Unity of Command, but I'm trying to remember if you could. But I know in this game you can have an aerial unit on top of a land unit. I did notice that, and I know that's a change because I believe in Panzer Corps 1 you couldn't do that.
Panzer Corps 1 there were two planes. There was an airplane and a ground plane. And units could occupy the same hex if one unit was a ground unit and one unit was an air unit. There was no stacking. You couldn't stack two ground units in the same hex, but you could stack an air unit on top of a ground unit in Panzer Corps 1.
Oh, okay.
In Unity of Command, that's very different because Unity of Command, air units don't take up a discrete space on the map in Unity of Command. In Unity of Command, air units are all off map, and you have a certain number of them that you can call in to do like tactical airstrikes, but they don't actually occupy any real space in the map. And part of that is because theoretically in Unity of Command all the airfields are off map, so like they're flying in from England, for example, if you're fighting in Normandy, which is real. But that's kind of how it's represented in Unity of Command. It's more of like calling in an artillery strike. You call in an airstrike, it comes in, it drops it bombs, it flies away, and it's not something that you have to worry about other than that.
I wanted to get your feedback on the map and the textures of like the mountains and the terrain. And even the units, because the units I've noticed that they put particular attention to make some really beautiful 3D models. What do you think? I mean, is it appealing while you're playing the game?
I don't really care, to be honest. I was not playing Panzer Corps 1 saying, I wish these were 3D units. Like, if anybody who remembers the Panzer General series by SSI, they'll remember SSI tried to do that. SSI made a Panzer General 1, a Panzer General 2. They had Panzer General 3, Scorched Earth, which was there was a Panzer General like Scorched Earth, and then eventually, like after 3 or 4 Panzer Generals, they're like, early 2000s now, we should really make a 3D game, and so they made Panzer General 3D Allied Assault, and it was the worst Panzer General game ever made. The whole shtick was we're going 3D. No one asked for it. No one really wanted it, but they made it, and it was a disaster of a game. Now, I'm not saying that's...
But you gotta admit, this is a big difference, though. This is gorgeous. I mean, this is looking at, like, I mean, some of the textures on here are absolutely just jaw-dropping gorgeous. The models are... I mean, when I'm playing the game, it really does... It's definitely eye candy. So it has some really great mechanics, but... You know, having those textures and the map is just, it's beautiful eye candy, at least for me, while I'm playing.
I mean, it looks fine. It looks fine. I guess that's my reaction.
Okay. Well, all right. So what do you think about then the units? So we talked about like the 3D models, but the beautiful thing that I love about this game, whenever I was trying to like build units, they literally have, I think they mentioned there was like 1,000 different units in the game. Did Panzer Corps 1 have that many?
I think so. I mean, they had the Panzer, they had the PZ-1, the 2, the 3, they had like the PZ-3J, the PZ-3H. I think so. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure they have more in this than they had in that. But whether it's a meaningful amount, I don't know. I mean, I think that was one of the, if you go back to SSI's Panzer General game, I think one of the appeals that game had is there were like 400 plus units back in the 1990 game. And one of the big appeals of that game was like, you have so many different types of units. That was one of the original things to be like, for a game back then, to say we've got the Panzer II, the Panzer III, not just the Panzer III, but the Panzer IIIH, the Panzer IIIJ, the Tiger, the Tiger I, the Tiger I, the Tiger II, the Panther G. You know, to have all of those different types of units in the game was a big selling point. And I remember the old SSI game used to give a write-up about each tank in the original Panzer General game. Like, you'd click on the tank and then it would say like the Tiger I had an engine that was developed by Porsche, and it had, you know, a 8.2 cylinder, and that doesn't make sense, but you know, it had that kind of information, like basically like a Jane's write-up description of each unit, and it was so cool back in the time, you know, back in the day. That wasn't something that games typically had that level of detail or that care behind them, and I think Panzer General 2 or Panzer Corps 2 here does a good job of doing that, but I don't know if it's unique to the series. I don't know if it's new to the series. I think they do a good job of having a large number of units. They do a good job of having certain types of units be better at certain things. There are support tanks that are better at infantry attacks. There are tanks that are better against other tanks. Like the Panzer III is much better against enemy tanks. The PZ-4 is much better against infantry, for example. And they give you all the different stats of like soft attack, hard attack, you know, that help communicate that information to you. And so I think they do a good job of that. But I wouldn't say that like, oh my goodness, it's got so many more units than any other Panzer Corps or Panzer General or any other game like this I've ever experienced. It feels right. It feels like they did a good job with it. But it doesn't feel like it's any different than the previous games in the series to me. One thing I will say, though, that I really like, and I think actually Panzer Corps 1 had this as well, but when you select a unit, it gives you its stats, like sort of on the side of the screen. If you have selected a unit that you're looking to buy, and then you hover over another unit in the same category, it will give you a comparison of those two different units' stats. So you'll see, like, if I've selected the Panzer III and then I hover over the PZ-4, you'll see, you know, it'll have in green where the unit you're hovering over has better stats, and it will show in red where the stats are worse, or it just won't have a color code where the stats are the same. And so that makes it a lot easier as you're looking at different types of units to figure out, like, do I want a tank that's really good against infantry? Do I want a tank that's better against other tanks? How do these two units compare? it'll really convey that information very seamlessly and effectively. And again, not new to the series, but still well done in Panzer Corps 2.
One thing I do like about it is, that you have a wide variety of historical units, that you can choose, like you were mentioning, different variations of the tanks. There were so many, when I was playing the German campaign, there were so many different variations of the tanks, and started realizing that the Germans had a lot more, had a lot of custom tanks and variations of those tanks. So I was kind of going over those stats. I thought that was kind of interesting. I really like those kind of things, because the one thing that I really was afraid of with games like that are tactical like this is, hey, we made, here's a tank unit, and you can get yourself, a Panther or a Panzer, and then we made 2 infantry units and 2 aerial units, and here's the game. And I always worry about that, because it basically makes it very generic, it's kind of like eating Cheerios versus, Fruit Loops, Maybe that's a bad analogy, but that's what I feel. And with this game, I feel more like it's, it has much more flavor to it. Because when I'm coming up on an enemy unit, I have to go over that enemy unit and say, which unit is this? What stats does this unit have, this tank have? What unit should I throw at it? Should I throw a light tank at it? No, man, this guy has a freaking hard attack of this. Let me find another unit that I can throw at it. So I do like that. And I really feel like the developer putting that much attention on having 1,000 different units just shows, I guess, how passionate they are about making a really great, authentic experience. A couple of the things that, at least for me, that I took away, going over my thing here. Oh, the animations. I know, maybe this not have hit your, I know you were mentioning, the 3D thing was not a real big thing for you, but because they are 3D, the animations that they have for this, along with the sound effects, are like fucking beautiful. I love the fact when, even after playing it for hours, having a tank just fire another tank and just having artillery barrage another unit or a city was, it was definitely really nice eye candy that I definitely didn't get bored of. So I really like that they did that. The music I thought was pretty good. It kind of immersed me a little bit more into the game. But I think the biggest thing out of this game that I'm going to be taking away, and that I'm very, very interested in seeing what will happen to this, is the scenario editor, which is what Slytherin and Flashback Games is adding to this game. I haven't taken a look at it, but from what I understand, it's going to be a really great scenario editor. It's going to be very easy to use. I don't know if I'm trying to remember if I actually pulled it up, if they bundled it with the beta. I'm trying to remember, but from what I understand, it's supposed to be easy to use. And I'm very interested in it, because I'm very excited to see what the community is going to come up with. Because I'm assuming when they launch this game, there's going to be a bunch of campaigns and a bunch of battles that the developer is going to add in. But I think where the genius comes in is where the community is going to come up with, adding a whole bunch of World War II era battles, aerial battles, maybe the area on Ploesti, or maybe, a battle that was part of Operation Barbarossa that, very few games ever, paid attention to. Maybe one, fan was like, look, I have an interest in this battle, and I'm going to make a Panzer Corps 2 scenario out of it. And I'm very interested in playing these things, because I think it's going to add so much replayability to this game that when you drop, I think this game is going to be like $40, I think. It doesn't have, it says the Field Marshal Edition is going to be $69.99, so I'm assuming it's either going to be $40 or $50.
Yeah, probably 40 if you get 2 DLCs. I'll be honest, the scenario editor's a nice to have, I guess. I'm curious what other people will make. I don't really have a lot of time to dabble with scenario editing. I'm not great at that kind of stuff anyway. I think the thing with this kind of a game to remember is I think you're doing it wrong if you're trying to model tactical battles, because it's not a tactical battle game, really. It's about operations. Fundamentally, it's an operational game. You're not doing intricate modeling of... there is no ballistics, right? Like, there's no sense of there's 100 tanks and they just fired 100 shells and the shells might ricochet off the enemy tank. That's all abstracted. It's a unit that might be a division. They kind of imply in the game it's a division, but in the history of Panzer Corps, it's always kind of ambiguous of what a unit really is. Moving across a map to take an objective. And when you engage an enemy, you hover your mouse over the enemy, and it'll give you an estimate of what's going to happen in the combat. And it's not 20 tanks are going to be knocked out. It's not, this unit's hull down, so it's defensive. No, it's very much you hover it over the unit, and it tells you, we think they're going to lose 4 hit points, and you're going to lose 3. It's all very, very abstract. Panzer Corps has always been somewhat of a beer and pretzel game. It's a very approachable game that I really enjoy playing, but I don't think it's the kind of game that you're going to be like, all right, let me model the tactical intricacies of an air battle over Germany. It's not designed to do that. It's designed to model operations that take place over the span of weeks in a somewhat high-level way. And that's perfectly fine, and I think it does a great job of that. But it's not... This isn't an advanced tactics game. It's not a combat mission game. Those are all trying to do very different things. Those are more battle simulators. This is more of a battle... I hate to say puzzle game because there's a little bit of puzzliness to some of the scenarios, but it's an operational game, and that's fine, and that's what I'm looking for. And I will say that the editor is probably really exciting and great for some people. It's not really what I'm the most excited about. I think I'm the most excited about the the campaigns that are going to come with the game. The game seems to be basically saying like, oh, you remember Panzer General 1? We have every single campaign in this game that was in that game. They have the 1939 to 1945 Grand Campaign that covers the entire war starting in Poland. They have the 1941 scenario or campaign that starts with the invasion of Russia. The 1941 scenario that starts with the German attack to the east toward Benghazi in the desert. The 43 scenario that starts with the Battle of it's either Kursk or I can't remember the name of the city. Kursk or Krakow, maybe, on the Russian front as the war is turning against the Germans, and then the 43 scenario or campaign where the Allies are counterattacking and invading Italy. Those are the 5 campaigns that are coming with the game. Those are the 5 exact same campaigns that came with Panzer General 1. It's also worth remembering that there are 61 battles that are going to be available in the campaign itself. So a lot of battles are coming with the game, regardless of whether you're going to use the editor or not. All the campaigns are from the German perspective. Presumably some of the DLC will add Allied campaigns as well. And the campaigns also have sort of a branching ability, which is cool, and it looks like they're sort of doubling down on this. This is one of the appeals of Panzer General 1, was this idea of, like, at certain points we were presented options. You could push the attack into the Middle East, or you could move to the Russian front, or you could, attack Moscow early versus maybe you would wait and you would do like the Stalingrad campaign. And so you were given these options after battles that would sort of chart the course of your campaign, and this game also lets you do that. This lets you do that in even more intricacy. The Poland campaign, for example, you can choose Poland North or Poland South. So you can the army groups drive on Warsaw, or the army groups drive on some of the key cities in the South. And so, for example, the invasion of France, you can choose to fight the invasion through Belgium as sort of the diversionary attack, or you can choose to fight the sort of flanking maneuver that went in through Sedan to try and cut the Allies off and drive to the Channel. And so you get these different options at different points in the campaign that influence which battles you fight, and it influences the character of the campaign a little bit as well. And so these are all things I'm really excited about. It sounds like we were really looking forward to different aspects of the game. You're really interested in sort of the visual side of things. I'm more interested in sort of some of the gameplay mechanics that are new or different from the previous versions of the game, or maybe are doing things a little bit differently or better than previous versions of the game. I've noticed some of the features and capabilities in the game seem to be borrowing from Order of Battle, which was a game that came out after Panzer Corps 1, which seemed to sort of modify some of what was very successful in Panzer Corps 1, but also what maybe was missing. This whole idea of units taking up a certain amount of capacity, and you only have a certain amount of capacity for the units, rather than saying you have 20 core units available, it was like you have a weight of 70 of ground units, and so different units take up different weights, and you can allocate that as best you can. That actually came from Order of Battle. That was not in the original Panzer Corps. Panzer Corps said you have this number of core slots, as opposed to, which was just equated to one slot as one unit. Order of Battle had this sense of like maybe an armored unit's only worth 3 and a ground unit's worth 2, an infantry unit's worth 2. And it seems to be they're adopting that from Order of Battle, where it's like this sense of you have a certain weight of strength you can have, but not necessarily a number of units. They're borrowing that. They're also bringing in sort of a suppression mechanic, which may have been in Panzer Corps 1, but I don't remember it being quite so distinct. So when you attack units, you can influence hit point damage, which actually kills men, but you can also suppress a unit. And so like when artillery hits an enemy unit, it might inflict casualties, but just as importantly, it might inflict suppression, and for every point of suppression you gain, one of the enemy's hit points basically is negated. So you can basically pound an enemy unit into sort of a concussed state, where then you can just basically destroy them with follow-on attacks because none of their men are shooting back. So that really adds the element of combined arms, right? Like you might want to hit enemy units with artillery to suppress them, then you can hit them with air to suppress them, and then you can attack them with a ground unit following to really break through and destroy the enemy. And so that really encourages combined arms type tactics with some of those mechanics. But it's an interesting game. I think one of the things that gives me a little bit of pause, not to kind of continue this lecture of me going for 5 minutes nonstop, but one of the things that gives me a little bit of pause is I think the early war scenarios are really well done. France seems like the right balance of size and scale. Norway feels the right balance of size and scale. I played a couple of the Russian scenarios. Those felt a little unwieldy, as we were kind of talking about John Tiller earlier, where like some of the battles were just too big for the mechanics that were involved. I played Rostov, the Rizev Salient. And that one, most of the Western European scenarios had like a weight limit of like 70 or 80 units, and it kind of gradually gets bigger as the campaign goes on. But Rizev, I believe you had like a 200 unit weight limit, which makes sense in theory because the Russian battles are bigger battles with more men involved. But that also resulted in me waiting a really, really long time for the enemy to move all of its units. And it just kind of felt like the scenario was too big. It just felt like things like I lost any sense of focus, any sense of direction. I lost any sense that this was a specific battle in time. It just felt like kind of a grindy slugfest without any real defining characteristics that I think could be problematic. If the entire Eastern Front is like that, where everything just gets too big, too unwieldy, and each scenario just kind of feels the same, then I worry that the Eastern scenario battles will be lacking. I think the Western European scenarios and the Poland scenarios and the Norway scenarios are all very well designed and very well crafted. I'm just worried that you'll lose a lot of that sense, a lot of that feel when you move to the Russian front.
I guess with this game, I feel like that's where the scenario editor will be really amazing, because this game obviously focuses on the Western, on the European campaign, both on the Eastern and Western front. I do feel like because there's going to be this scenario editor, right, that you're not limited just to Europe. You're going to have people that are going to be probably making scenarios based upon, not only North Africa, but possibly, I seen even in this Steam site, they have the eastern coast of the United States, right? I could see them adding in Japanese, right? I could see some people modeling Japanese units and then maybe like incorporating Pacific battles. I think in Panzer General, I remember when it first came out, I believe there were a couple of mods out there that actually simulated Pacific battles. So I can see that happening here. But, I mean, the cool thing about this game is that you can go big or you can go small, right? So with the scenario editor, if you wanted to focus on this small battle, let's say somewhere in Russia, you can model it, and you can, not have a unit represent a whole division. You can have a unit represent maybe a company, right? And kind of zoom in on the map a little bit, not be so operational, be more tactical, and be a little bit more zoomed in, which will be really cool. A good example of that is Strategic Command, right? So I was playing Strategic Command 1, and that game has, I think each hex is, I don't know, like 30 to 50 square miles, right? So if I move one hex, I can go from Germany all the way to the outskirts of Amsterdam, literally in 1 or 2 hexes. But they just released a new scenario, the developers did, where it kind of zooms in on just a certain part of the battlefield. So you moving now 1 hex is the equivalent of now like 1 mile, right? And they, have like a zoomed in part of the French, Belgium, and German border. So I feel like with this scenario editor, they can do the same thing with Panzer Corps, and it opens up the game a lot more than just operational level game.
But I don't think the game's mechanics are really set up to do that. Like, the game doesn't model fire. It doesn't model units laying down actual fire. It's all on a hit point scale. It's not designed to do that. Like, unless you're actually going to give me shells and shell and ballistics, which the game doesn't really factor in at all, I don't think you can, like, I don't know. To me, I don't think the game would do a good job of modeling tactical combat, because there's no sense of, it hit this spot of the armor, and so this is what's going to happen to the shell, because there is no shell, there is no armor, there's just sort of abstract figures to say this unit's this good against hard attack or soft attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be that in depth. Like in a John Tiller game, I definitely noticed that, like, if you fire on a tank, it can ricochet. It's definitely not going to have that kind of thing, but I feel like it's going to.
It can't. I mean, it's not how it's built.
Yeah, so I feel like in this game, it's going to provide like not that extreme in terms of tactical simulation, in terms of like how extreme that is, but it's not going to be. You don't have to go full operational campaign where, you're dealing with the whole Battle of Leningrad and the entire North campaign of Operation Barbarossa. So I feel like you can kind of like measure up or measure down in this kind of game. I feel there's a lot more possibilities. I remember when I played Panzer General, I remember there were like these huge, scenarios where you're taking over Italy or the boot of Italy. And I remember playing scenarios where like they took a section. I remember playing, I forgot which battle it was, but it was just a small battle in Germany where you had like one town and the surrounding outskirts of that town. And you had much smaller units than the game launched with, like not division, but more like I think they were company or regimental units. So I feel like, you can kind of go up and down on that meter. But I don't know. Let me see what other things. I think I covered all the stuff that I wanted to cover with. The last thing I wanted to ask you is if you had to kind of like choose the best World War II operational level game, and you had Panzer Corps 2, and then you had other games like Unity of Command 2, and the other games that you have played, which would be like your go-to? You played Panzer Corps 2, the beta, you played Unity of Command 2, and I'm sure you played a number of other operational level World War II strategy games. Which one would be like your go-to and why?
I think it depends. I hate to use a cop-out to say it depends. If I want to look at the early war period of time, and I want the sense of blitzkrieg and the sense of breaking through lines, rushing through open space, moving forward, taking cities in the rear, then I think Panzer Corps 2 would probably be it, or Panzer Corps 1. because I think they do a really good job of modeling that kind of operational warfare. I think if I wanted to look at sort of a slightly more tactical, because there are more tactical options in it, logistical-focused game, I would still go with Unity of Command 2, because Unity of Command 2 has multiple attack options. Even in this game, even in Panzer Corps 2, it's kind of you attack or you don't, right? Unity of Command has the option to launch a feint, the option to launch a set-piece attack, the option to launch a bombardment. It has a lot more tactical options for attacking fixed positions. And so if I wanted to look at the Allied counterattacks from 43 through to the end of the war, it would probably be Unity of Command 2. If I wanted to look more at sort of the early war German Blitzkrieg, I think it would be Panzer General 2 at this point in time.
Okay, that's interesting. I like the way you kind of put that. So overall, if you had to give like a recommendation on this game for $40, what do you think?
I don't like telling other people how to spend their money. I would say if you want a game, if you are looking for a game that allows you to play World War II from the start to the finish in Europe, and you want a branching campaign that allows you to build up units and sort of gain a sort of camaraderie with your units, gain a sense of who these units are, and so you can kind of tell that story in a game that focuses on the Germans, then and you're looking for a turn-based game that's a little bit abstract, pretty easy to approach, pretty easy to play, but you're not looking for detailed combat resolution, then I would say this is a great game for you. Regardless of the price. I think, price is sort of secondary in my mind. Obviously, everybody has a price they're willing to spend, but I don't think price, whether it's $40 or $50, I don't think that really makes a big difference in terms of my recommendation. It comes down to the experience the player is looking for. And again, if the player is looking for a turn-based strategy war game that allows them to play from the beginning of the war to the end of the war in Europe, that is somewhat abstract, easy to pick up and play, but also really helps sort of communicate the importance of combined arms, then I think this is a great game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this was my, I think, third most anticipated game of 2020. I was really looking forward to this game. Once I played it, it gave me that addicting, I would say, attraction to the game where it's, I believe they call it just one more turn. And I always had that compulsion to, like, I'm going to finish this turn, I'll save it and go away and go to work or something like that. And this game always kind of wanted me to just like, hold on, let me just do one more. And I really like when a game does that because I always feel like I'm getting my money's worth. The more, for me, it comes down to how many hours am I going to put into the game. Because there are some games that I spent $40 that I was like, all right, I'm going to really like this game. And I played it, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I invested like 4 hours, spent $40 on a game. I might play it down the road. I always feel like could have spent my money somewhere else and got more hours out of this. I feel with this game, like, I'm going to invest as many hours as I did with like Strategic Command, which I think I'm at like 40 or 50 or 60 hours. So for me, it's a great value. I was definitely looking forward to this game primarily because of all the stuff that I mentioned. I'm really looking for a DLC where they add like maybe an Allied perspective, or they kind of look at like the Pacific theater kind of thing. But if they don't, I'm really looking at the community doing it. So that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hesitant to say, here's the number of, here's how much you spent per hour that you played. Like, I'm not looking to maximize hours played against dollars spent on most of the games. It depends on the game and the experience, but I worry that leads developers down bad paths of adding crap just to add crap. I think there can be tightly designed games that don't have very long playthroughs that can be well worth the money. I think Yes, Your Grace, which we talked about it earlier, I played through the first campaign in about 7 hours. I think it's about a $20 game. And you know what? It was worth every dollar. If and I probably will go play through it again, but if I only played through it once and I only played it for 7 hours, the fact that it's $20 that is well worth every dime I spent on that game, because it is focused on telling a tight narrative experience that is trying to evoke something out of the player as they're moving through it. And I think that, hey, let's be honest. Like, if you go to a movie theater, you're going to spend $10 anyway just to get like a 3-hour movie in. So if I double that and it talks to me or moves me in a way that a movie would, but over twice the time, who cares, right? Like, maybe it's double the price, but it's certainly, for the amount of time I spent on it, it is well worth every dollar I spent. On the flip side, if I bought Panzer Corps and I only played it for 10 hours, I would probably say that's not, it's maybe the game wasn't what I had hoped it to be. Now, I don't think I will only play Panzer Corps 10 hours. In fact, I've already played it more than 10 hours. But I think it depends on the game and the design and what it's trying to do. There are games that I think you need to play a bunch more hours to get what the developer is trying for you to get out of it. There are games that are shorter, but they punch real hard and they really do a good job of evoking a very controlled and experience in a shorter period of time. It all depends, in my opinion, what the game is trying to do, and does it do a good job of doing that, and what's the experience you have with that game. And at the end of the day, after that, the number of hours played is somewhat secondary to the experience that you have. And I just get, not to get on my soapbox, because I know you're just sharing your own opinion, and that's perfectly fine. But I worry that we as gamers get too tied up in how many hours did I play it, as opposed to the actual experience that you had when you were playing it, and the experience the developer was trying to share, and did that hit home with you? Because I don't think, War in the Pacific, that is a game that I will spend 100+ hours playing, and so, it's easy to turn around and say, yeah, it's really expensive, but I played a ton of hours, so it's worth it. On the flip side, if it's a short game, if it does what it's trying to do, and it means something to me, like, I will use Valiant Hearts as an example. I think I played that campaign in about 10 hours. So World War I sort of RPG type game, side-scrolling type game. And that game, to this day, years later, I have not played that game in 3 or 4 years, but years later, it is still one of the most emotionally charged games that I have played. The way that game built up, the experience that you have, and the way that it ends, it is brilliant. It is a work of art. And if that game had been $50 or $60 or $70, it would have been worth every dollar that I paid on it, because of the experience that I had playing it, and the number of hours don't matter. And I'll get off my soapbox. But I guess my point is, I think in terms of the number of hours played, it really comes down to the game design and what it's trying to do, and your experience with the game.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from with, Valiant Hearts. Those kind of experiences, yeah, definitely, that kind of influence, emotion. And
it doesn't need to be as long, if that, right? Like, open-ended games like EU, I think you need to play more to get out of it, or whatever you're trying to get out of it, because you're telling your own story as much as the game is telling its story to you. Games that are telling a very specific narrative experience, you know what? That experience, frankly, is going to be better if it is shorter and more well-crafted in many cases than if it's long and filled with fluff. Because if it's filled with fluff, it loses its focus. But it all depends on the game and what it's trying to do and how it's designed and what the purpose of the experience is, right? Because there are games that are trying to tell a story like a movie. And if you just add 20 hours of crap just so you can say you've got extra stuff in the game, then all of a sudden your experience is diluted and you don't experience what you're trying to experience.
There was something my friend Bob mentioned.
Yes, Bob.
He mentioned,
good guy.
I'm glad you remember him. Yeah, so he was mentioning he's a massive fan of Stellaris, and Stellaris I think goes for $40, and he always talks about Stellaris every time we run into each other. Went to see one of the last Star Wars movie. He was talking about Stellaris and different campaigns that he was playing, And I asked him, I was like, how many hours do you have? And looking at his Steam page, he's at like over 1,600 hours in that game. And I remember he broke it down one day for me, and he said something like, I spent $40 on this game. And he says, if you break that down based upon how many hours I invested in it, it literally comes down to like a couple of cents per hour. And when he broke it down, I was like, geez, you got a lot of value out of that purchase. He said, yeah, I did. And I remember thinking of that, and I spent, I think like $40 on seeing Star Wars, the latest one, the last one with whatever, that Kylo Ren, whatever guy. And I remember just saying, shit, I spent $40 and that movie sucked. I don't know if you saw it, but
I haven't seen the newest one, but I mean, that's fine. I just, I think sometimes we spend too much effort in trying to justify the purchase that we make. And I think the important thing is like, hey, did you know, I don't care if it's 50 cents per hour of your time or if it's $5 per hour of your time. Did you enjoy the experience? Did you get something out of it? Do you think it was worth it? And I think that's really what matters more than anything, right? Like, you know, if I don't play Your Grace again, 7 hours of my time, and boy, that game hit hard and was a tremendous experience, and I really enjoyed it, and it was worth every dime. And if I had paid $40, would it have been half as good? No, because it would still be the experience I got. Now, if you ask me, would I pay $400 for that? Maybe not. But would I pay $20? Yes. Would I pay $40? Yes. Does $40 make it half as good of a game as at $20 because my, time value whatever calculation is double? No. So I just think it comes down to, you know what, at the end of the day, did you enjoy the experience? Do you think you got your money's worth? It's a personal decision. It's a personal question. And that's my only point.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I definitely agree with you on that. But I look forward to the game actually releasing and, putting a little bit more hours into it, seeing what people come out with the scenario editor.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it'll be different, too, because I know they were still polishing and working on things. I know, for example, like the voice acting wasn't in the game yet when we had access to it, and they said that is coming. That was always one of the things that was really appealing to me in Panzer General was this, old crotchety German, this old crotchety Prussian military guy giving you your briefing before every battle. That was always fun, and that wasn't in there yet. That's one of those small things that adds a lot of charm. So I'm curious to see, what else they may have polished or what else might have been tweaked or changed or whatever. But I'm definitely looking forward to this game coming out.
The only thing I hope they kind of enhance, because I remember when I played it, you probably didn't experience this, but when I played it, I noticed, so I have an AMD 560 with 4 gigs of video RAM, so it's like a mid-range graphics card. And when I played it, I noticed that my frame rate went into like the teens, like 13 or 15 frames per second. And I was kind of like surprised by that, so I had to tone down the graphics and the resolution of the screen quite a bit down to like I think low. And I was kind of surprised because like even Paradox games like full EU4 with high graphics or Imperator with high graphics, I'm still in like the 30s and 40s with the frame rates. So I did notice that I'm hoping they refine the game so it's not that much resource intensive on people that have mid-range graphics cards like me. I know for you probably never experienced anything because you got a full-on 1080.
No, I had some issues with it stuttering and lagging at times. I don't think it is a graphics card issue. I think it was probably a CPU thing. I really don't think anything that's going on in Panzer Corps is going to tax much in the way of most graphics cards. So I think it's more of either a RAM thing or a CPU thing where it's trying to process a lot of data or information or things like that. That being said, we were playing a month and a half before release, so I would expect the release version of the game will be more optimized than that was.
Yeah, I'm going to cross my fingers on that. But and then one last thing, if I can add before we move on to our drinks, I'm hoping, I know you're going to hate me for this, Panzer Corps 1 came to the iPad I'm hoping Panzer Corps 2 makes its way to the iPad. I know the market has changed since Panzer Corps 1 came to the iPad, and a lot of things, with a lot of things that are becoming in-app purchasing, and the whole game market on tablets and phones have changed. But I really do hope this game makes it there, because I do find myself playing that quite a bit. So this is from me to the developer, please.
I doubt it. I think, is it Marco or Ian or someone at Matrix has basically made the comment that, like, it just economically, iPad is not a profitable place for them. They had tried to really dive into the iPad space 4 years ago or so, and I think the market shifted, and I think you can see that most of their games, if any, I don't think go to iPad anymore. So I doubt that it will. You're right. I mean, I think Panzer Corps is a uniquely special game that would work on iPad, and I think the original did. I'm not sure did they ever update it for 64-bit, or when the apocalypse occurred and Apple forced developers to remove any 32-bit games, did it get removed?
No, because I could still go inside the app and still play.
Oh, okay. Because I know Commander the Great War got removed, and that was a really good game.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, that sucked.
But I know I just think. I don't think people are willing to spend money on iPads in the app market, and so I'm skeptical whether we'll see this there. I hope it does show up there, because I do think it is a game that would work well there. But
I do too, because I mean, honestly, like Feral Interactive brought Company of Heroes. They also brought like Tropico and Total War series, and those ports are making a lot of money.
Are they making a lot of money?
I mean, from the reviews that I see, where it's in like, I think last time I checked, it was for Total War, there was like thousands of reviews, and I believe I saw for Company of Heroes, it had a ton of 5-star reviews. I don't know if it was in hundreds or thousands, but
you're also talking about two of the most popular game franchises of literally our lifetimes, the Total War series and Company of Heroes. I don't, as much as I love Panzer General and Panzer Corps, I don't think they're in the same league. Panzer General might have been in its day, but I don't think Panzer Corps is in the same league as Total War or Company of Heroes, at least in people's minds. I hope it comes there, but I also think the other thing to keep in mind is, like, Total War came there like 15 years after the Total War they put there was out, right? Like, they brought Rome Total War 1 there, like 15 years after it came out. And is it Company Heroes 1 that's on iPad?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that they've done Company Heroes 2. Like, when was Company Heroes 1? Was that like 10 years ago? So I don't know if they're going to bring a brand new game to iPad. Also, these are probably third-party developers that are taking all the risk up front and eating all the cost up front, and they're probably just telling the publisher, like, hey, we'll do this, you'll get your cut, just give us the rights to do this. So there's not probably a lot of risk for the publisher either, because they're probably not spending a dime on doing it. I don't know that anybody's going to go to Slytherin and say, like, hey, we want to put one of your games on iPad, we'll front all the bills.
I wish. I'm gonna
hey man,
hope for that.
You could. I've got faith in you.
I'll have to start my publishing company.
I hate to be the pessimistic realist here, but someone's got to be. Tortuga's not on here, so.
So I'm kind of curious. What have you been drinking tonight?
Well, I told you, Corona.
Don't say Corona.
I've been drinking
Corona.
Corona.
Oh gosh, that's right.
I've had one Corona tonight. So as much as I've been drinking, I've had one beer.
And you didn't put anything in it since we've been talking.
No lime, no nothing. Just straight Corona, straight skunk.
Was there only like one in the house?
By the way, I don't know why they don't have brown bottles, right? Like, Corona would be a much better beer if it didn't have so much UV exposure. But they put it in a clear bottle, which means it gets a shit ton of sun unless it's like in a sealed box, and they're always in like 6-packs that get all the light in the world gets in there.
Oh, I didn't even think of that, yeah.
Like, they should be in a brown bottle, or they should be in a can, or they should be some way to not, like, be exposed to light. Because that...
What do you think the light does to it? Is it, like, dilute the carbonation?
No, it has nothing to do with carbonation. Like, I'm not a beer expert, but it's literally scientific fact that you get a bunch of UV or light in a beer and it causes it to go bad.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
That's why so many beers have brown bottles.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question, but I never Googled it. So you saved me a Google search.
I can't speak to the science behind it, but it's definitely a thing.
Interesting. Well, for me, coffee. For me, it's 0 to it's almost 3 a.m. So, I stick with my coffee for these late nights. So.
But it's really only 2 a.m. in your mind because we just had daylight savings.
Oh, yeah, I fucking hate that shit. I lost an hour of sleep last night because of that.
If we could just fall back nonstop, I would be 100% behind that.
Yeah, I wish they would just drop that completely. I heard there was a movement behind that. People were saying, we don't need daylight savings.
No,
it was like
we
even
do
a
need
Twitter...
daylight savings. I want more sleep, so let's just keep falling back an hour every once in a while.
If you do make a petition for that, be sure to link that to me.
I'm behind it. Falling back is the best invention ever for daylight savings. Springing forward is the dumbest invention ever.
I heard in Arizona they don't go backwards or forwards, so I might want to move there.
Yeah, but that's lame. Then I don't get an extra hour of sleep in the fall. I want an extra hour of sleep. They should fall back, then they should spring back, then they should fall back again and spring back again. Eventually it'll normalize and it'll be fine.
Or you can get a house in two places, and then when it's about to go forward, you could just move back to Arizona.
I don't have that kind of money. What are you talking about?
Well, when you join my publishing company, then that's when we'll start making money. You can buy that house.
I'll talk about your stuff on my YouTube channel. I will talk about it on this podcast, and I expect a 51% ownership of your company.
Done. In New York, that makes it a deal.
All right. Well, we're good then. Now I own 51%. All right. Well, we should probably wrap this thing up. I don't think you said you said you were drinking coffee. All right. So I'm drinking Corona, or I was drinking Corona. You are drinking coffee. This is episode number 51 of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast, where we talked about Panzer Corps 2, amongst other things. I, on behalf of the historical gamer myself, and Jean, the strategy wargamer, and Tortuga Power, the Tortuga Power, who was on the episode earlier. Thank you all once again for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, we'll catch you guys later.
See you guys.